They told me I wasn't on the list on my own father's 80th suit-pressed gift in hand. Name's Ellison Druitt, 54, retired Navy colonel, still had my badge polished just yesterday. Funny how cold a spring day feels when the foyer door shuts and the scent of lemon polish stays behind. Ever been cut out of something you built with both hands? I stood under the slanted sun of a spring afternoon shirt, freshly pressed collar, stiff from starch, a small box tucked neatly under my arm. The kind of box that meant something, a gift measured by care, not by price. The navy ribbon around it had faded over time, but I thought that added to its charm. It matched my tie. It matched my intention. Name, the young man at the entrance asked, flipping through a clipboard with more importance than needed. I gave it calm and clear Ellison Druitt. He paused. Eyebrows pulled slightly. A wrinkle of confusion crept across his forehead. He flipped a page, then flipped back. I'm sorry, sir. You're not on the list. I let the words land. Let them hang. Not because I was surprised, but because part of me hoped this would be the moment he'd grin and say, "Just kidding." He didn't. Through the foyer glass, I could see the tables already set white linen and candles at 3 p.m. I spotted Shailene standing behind the welcome desk, fussing with a bouquet of pale tulips. She glanced up, made direct eye contact with me just for a second, and then looked away like I was the mailman dropping off another bill. Micah was just behind her, already laughing with one of the town commissioners. He wore a charcoal blazer I recognized from our father's closet. It still fit him better than it ever did Dad. He didn't see me or chose not to. Hard to tell with Micah. I turned back to the guard. You sure about that? Yes, sir. I double-checked. Would you like to call someone inside? I'm here for my father's 80th, I said, quieter than I intended. I just want to drop this off. He shifted his weight, glanced toward Shailene. She caught his look but offered nothing. No nod, no wave, not even a polite lie. I could almost hear her voice in his head. Follow the list. Don't make exceptions. The box in my hand felt heavier, or maybe my fingers were just colder than I realized. I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out my old Navy badge, colonel rank brushed clean, still intact after all these years. I held it out slowly, not with authority, but with memory, as if saying, this too was once part of my name. The young man hesitated. I'm sorry, sir, he said again, voice more careful now. Those were my instructions. I nodded once and placed the badge back into my coat. Behind him, laughter spilled from the reception hall. Dad's laugh, unmistakable, warm like bourbon on a winter evening. Someone clinked a glass. A voice, maybe the mayor, called out, "To Jeremiah's boys." A cheer followed, and yet no one looked toward the door. The security guard gently closed the doors in front of me. I stood there a moment longer, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the tinted glass. I didn't look angry. Not exactly. Just tired. Like a man who had walked into the wrong decade by mistake. The breeze caught the hem of my jacket as I turned to leave. Across the street, the diner sat where it always had Milton's since 1973. Its neon flickered in the window, though the sun hadn't yet dipped far enough to warrant it. In the booth by the window, a silver-haired woman stirred her tea, slowly, eyes fixed on me. Marion Blay. She hadn't changed much, maybe a bit thinner, her jawline a little more defined. But her eyes were the same sharp, still knowing. She didn't wave, just watched, as if she had been expecting me. I crossed the street without looking back. Marion stirred her tea exactly 3 times small, steady circles that made no sound in the chipped ceramic cup. She looked at me only once during that motion, and when she did, I knew the conversation wouldn't be casual. "They didn't just forget you, Ellison," she said. "They erased you." The scent of bacon grease still clung to the vinyl booths, no matter how often they wiped them down with lemon-scented cleanser. Milton's hadn't changed much since the days we sat in this very booth after every town planning meeting. Back then, Marion had a sharper voice, quicker to cut through a lie. Now her voice was low, like a file smoothing metal. She reached into her canvas tote, worn at the seams, and pulled out a thin, folded folder. It wasn't marked, but she slid it across the table like it held heat. "You built this," she said, tapping it twice. "Every line of the fund algorithm. I still remember you explaining it with a napkin and a butter knife." I opened the folder. Quarterly disbursements. Names, amounts, group codes, all laid out with precision. Except my name wasn't there, not even in the footnotes. Like I'd never contributed, never served, never designed the very logic that now divided the shares. I thought I began. "You thought it ran on autopilot," she said. "It doesn't. Not anymore." I flipped a few pages. The amounts shifted drastically from one quarter to the next. There was a note in the margin. "Revised proxy authorization, March 2021. Micah," I said quietly. Marion nodded. "He took sole proxy last spring. Quiet vote. Board said it was temporary until you formally declined participation." "Except," she leaned closer, "you never got that letter." I didn't answer. My fingers were pressed against the paper, not gripping, just holding like it might drift away if I let go. Marion pointed to the last page. "Look at the signature." I saw it immediately. My name scribbled in the slant I used to use before the Navy taught me better. But one thing stood out, a crooked E. I hadn't written my E like that since sophomore year. "I didn't sign this. I know." Lucy appeared beside the table, a tray balanced in one hand. "You boys eating or just drinking memories?" Marion smiled faintly. "We'll take 2 Reuben specials, Lou." Lucy turned to me and tilted her head. "How's your dad? L. He's still swinging that cane like it's a command stick." I opened my mouth and let a version of the truth out. "Still proud." She chuckled, topped off my water without asking, and moved on. Marion waited until Lucy was out of earshot, then said, "Shailene filed it." "What?" "She filed the proxy change. I traced the notary's schedule. Shailene filed it the same day your name was left off the guest list." I leaned back, feeling the creak of the booth against my spine. "Why now?" She stirred her tea again, slower this time. "Because it's not just about you, Ellison. I ran the full recipient list. 10 names dropped in the last 6 quarters. Most of them older, quiet folks without lawyers. You weren't the first. You're just the one I recognized." Outside the window, a child pressed his face against the glass, leaving a perfect circle of fog. He laughed when he saw me noticing, then disappeared toward the parking lot. "I don't have anything left in that fund," I muttered. "It's not about money." Marion gave me a long, measured look. "You think this is about money?" She reached for her tea, but instead of drinking, she held the cup close as if warming her hands. "When they erase a name like yours, someone with history, contribution, backbone, what chance does the next person have? The young ones? the ones who don't know how to fight. The folder sat between us like a third presence. I didn't touch it again. Why now? I asked. Why come to me after all these years? Her eyes didn't flinch. Because I remember who you were before they dressed you in silence. The food arrived. We didn't eat right away. I hadn't climbed into the attic in years. The ladder groaned like it knew the weight of the memory I was carrying up with me. The air up there was the kind that held on to smells cardboard dust, the faint twang of old cedar paneling, and the iron hush of things unsaid. I didn't come up to chase ghosts. I came for proof. The single bulb overhead flickered once before settling into a dull amber glow. I ducked past an old window unit and navigated between boxes labeled with thick black marker. Dad, 2005 Navy orders. 96 2011 fund design drafts. That last one called to me like a buried wire humming beneath the floorboards. I used to think filing things by hand was a waste of time. Now I was grateful for every staple and paperclip. The folder creaked when I opened it. Inside my original typed plan for the Technicorps Retirement Fund. The formatting looked archaic, now double-spaced Times New Roman with numbered footnotes, but the content was unmistakably mine. At the bottom, my signature dated, notarized, pressed into the paper with the kind of pen I used before arthritis started whispering in my knuckles. I held it under the bulb. The ink was darker in spots, signs of pressure. My hand had meant each letter. Downstairs, my phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. The attic floor carried the vibration faintly like a knock from a distant room. I ignored it. Instead, I pulled a second copy from the envelope Marion gave me a current filing. Same structure, same clauses. But when I lined up the signatures overlaying one page against the other, even in the low light, the misalignment was clear. Less than a millimeter. A shift in the E. A curve too soft. Whoever signed this hadn't known the old injury in my wrist that always made my N lean slightly right. Back when we were boys, I once showed Micah how to forge my signature. We were playing trying to get out of a late fee at the video rental. I told him then, "You're too clean with the slant. Real writing has tension." He remembered. I flipped to another page, proxy authorization dated 2021. My name again. But this time, the date format was wrong. I'd never written May 9th, 2021. I always wrote it 9 May 2021. Navy formatting dies hard. Then I saw it. A faint brown ring on the corner of the page coffee stain just shy of the footer. Not random. It matched the pattern from Marion's desk, the one that always tilted slightly, leaving half-moon shadows on everything. I'd teased her about it for years. This copy had been on her desk. A cassette deck whirred faintly in the corner. I'd set it spinning by accident when moving a box. Dad's voice crackled through the attic mid-sentence. You can't build trust on silence, and you can't expect legacy to do its own work. I froze. That tape was from the 2006 Veterans Luncheon. I'd recorded it to send to Micah when he missed it for his grad school finals. Dad's words, warm and rough, filled the attic like he was sitting beside me. I leaned back on my heels. The boxes seemed to close in a little. A yellow post-it fluttered down from inside one folder. I caught it before it landed. Dad's handwriting. Ellison, triple check survivor clause. His old blue felt-tip pen. Faded, but still visible. My phone buzzed again. I climbed down to check. Voicemail from Marion. Her voice was tight. Just saw something else. Shailene's calendar, it's archived but not wiped. There's an entry. Board review. Include Ellison's removal doc. Dated 2 months before you got that voluntary discharge letter. I sank into the kitchen chair and looked at my own signature again. The page didn't lie, but neither did the way my chest burned. I'd told myself for months that stepping away had been a choice. Now I wasn't so sure I'd ever been at the wheel. I entered the back room of the storage unit, the way I used to approach dry docks, head lowered, breath, measured eyes already scanning for potential leaks. Unit 3B looked like it hadn't been opened in months, maybe years. The padlock had a film of pollen on it, yellow and fine, clinging like time. The keycard still worked. I heard the click of release before I even dared hope. The door creaked open slowly enough for a burst of stale air to meet me, paper rot binding glue ink fumes from an era that still trusted carbon copies. I stepped in and let the light fall behind me. The halogen overhead buzzed and flickered like it wasn't used to visitors. Shadows played along the rows of record boxes stacked with more faith than structural sense. The badge in my pocket pressed against my ribs like a reminder. Heavier than before, like it knew. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The storage shelves were organized by contribution year. The old Naval Maintenance Guild had leased this place after they lost their official funding in '09. Paper didn't ask questions. It just waited. 2002, 2006. Contributions. I found it. A tall box with a green sticker curled up on one corner. I eased it down and set it on the metal ladder shelf behind me. A puff of dust flew into the air, thick and grey. I coughed once, muffled it into my elbow. Inside, notarized forms. Original, signed in blue ink, my blue ink the pen I'd always refilled instead of replacing. The pressure marks were still there, especially in the loop of my D where I always hesitated. I didn't need a graphologist. I needed the truth. I flipped through the stack. There were contribution tables, internal memos, annotated sidebars. A few had my handwriting, including one with a doodle of a ship's hull. That was my shorthand for no structural compromise. These were mine. My foot slipped as I stepped down. The ladder wobbled. Instinct took over, knee bent, hand reached. The box stayed on the ledge. But my badge slipped. It fell hard, corner first, hit the concrete, and bounced once the sound sharp like a cracked bone. I stared. The metal had split clean through the middle, from the bottom edge to the base of the eagle's wing. Not shattered, not bent, just cracked. I knelt, slowly reached for it, and lifted both halves into my palm. They sat like the two sides of a story that no longer touched. When I looked up, I noticed the red glow above the storage door. A security cam, one of the newer kinds. Passive, quiet, unnoticed unless you knew where to look. It had just blinked. I didn't hear a sound, but I knew that somewhere someone had just marked my presence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid it out with one hand, still holding the broken badge. Text from Marion. They know you were there. Check your inbox. They're starting to dig into yours now. I leaned back against the shelf paper, brushing my shoulder. All I'd wanted was proof. Now I had it. And someone else knew I did. Travis Lamont shook my hand like we'd seen each other just last week, not 15 years ago. He didn't bother with pleasantries. His eyes landed on my chest, the spot where my badge used to rest. "Still carry that badge?" he asked. I opened my palm. 2 halves of polished brass glinted under the low bar light. He didn't say anything right away. just reached over to the bar and poured a measure of bourbon from a bottle older than some careers. "I remember when they almost cut me, too," he muttered, setting the glass down without drinking. "It only takes one voice to call you back." We sat near the wall of medals, some bright, some dulled, all from men who didn't ask for thanks. Dad's was there too, top left, still bearing the dust of time. Travis had taken to sitting under it lately. He said it helped him think straight. The bar was quiet, only 2 other patrons in the far booth, and Marian perched on a corner stool, with her glasses fogged from the warmth of her tea. She'd chosen her spot well far enough to avoid the echo close enough to hear everything. I slid the cracked badge onto the table between us. Travis didn't touch it. He looked at it like it was something sacred, or broken beyond repair. "I need more than sympathy," I said. "You'll have it." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a narrow folder. "I came prepared. Signed affidavit. Your service record. Rank. Contribution log to Technicore handwritten notes included." He tapped the folder slowly once per word. "Legal teeth." Marian stepped forward without waiting for a cue. She placed another stack beside Travis's folder leaner, but heavier somehow. "Shailene's distribution notes," she said. "The audit trail goes through her login. Not Micah's. Not even admin accounts." Travis raised a brow. "That'll get messy." She used internal redaction tools, Marian added, but the cache was copied 2 weeks ago, before she tried to erase the flags. For a moment no one spoke. The air was warm with old wood and something deeper, like the silence that follows a ceremony too private for words. Travis looked back at the badge. Let them try to hide behind the guest list now. He turned to me, then leaned in slightly. "You want this to stop in court or in front of a microphone?" I didn't answer immediately. My fingers brushed the affidavit. Real paper, real ink, my name where it belonged. Travis continued. "There's a gala next Friday, Kentucky Engineers Association. Micah's slated to speak on fund logistics. If you're there." "He'll deflect," I said. "Maybe. Or maybe he'll see his own shadow," Travis replied. "I'll stand beside you. You walk in with a general at your back. They'll start rewriting the list." The bourbon between us sat untouched. I took a sip slow. It burned, then settled into something cleaner. Marian tapped her phone, squinted. "They've updated the admin protocols. Micah filed a restriction against internal audit access. It's moving faster than I thought." I looked at her. "They're bracing," she added. "You just stepped back onto the board." I glanced down at the 2 badge halves still resting in my palm. Broken doesn't mean worthless. Sometimes it just means someone's scared to see you whole again. The civic auditorium had never looked so polished. Blue and gold drapes shimmered under the spotlight, casting soft hues across the wooden floor. Rows of round tables stretched toward the back, all filled with engineers, fund partners, city board members, people who remembered numbers better than names. Micah stood center stage, hands relaxed on either side of the podium, like he'd been born to stand behind it. His voice filled the room, smooth, measured. "And as we honor this year's advancements, we must remember the foundation we stand upon. My father, Jeremiah Druitt, taught us all that honor is earned through service. Legacy. He always said comes not just from building, but from building well." The crowd gave a polite round of applause. "Predictable. Polished." Micah continued. "Our family's legacy." He paused. Something in the word didn't land. His throat clicked, and for a breath too long he didn't go on. That's when Travis Lamont stood. No fanfare, no clearing of throat, just a slow rise from his seat in the fourth row clean dress blues, catching the spotlight the shine on his shoes like a second light source. He didn't face the stage first. He turned to the crowd. "My name," he said, "is Brigadier General Travis Lamont. I served with Colonel Ellison Druitt in multiple theaters. I reviewed his systems. I've witnessed his integrity. And I find it odd, painfully so, that an event about legacy would forget the man who designed the very fund many of you are here to protect." He turned toward the stage, then pointed. Not harsh, not dramatic, just deliberate. "Stand. Salute your colonel." For a second, nothing moved. Then someone in the second row stood. A man I vaguely remembered from the docks, Freeman No. Guilford. He raised a hand in crisp salute. Then a woman 3 tables over, Sonia Brill, former technician board clerk. She stood, lifted her hand too. Then Marion. Then the man seated next to her, one of the Technicorps board. Then 2 others from the back, older than most here, standing slower but straighter. The room was silent except for the shuffling of chairs as the salute spread. There was no music, no clapping, just the steady breathing of people realizing they had missed something and were trying to catch up. Micah stared forward, eyes unmoving. The spotlight flickered once, then held. The podium looked smaller now, his shoulders stiffer. I rose from my seat at the side wall and walked toward the stage. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. At the podium, I reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out both halves of the badge. The crack was clean, but the metal still bore every reflection of light that hit it. I set them down on the podium right where the notes for Micah's speech sat. I heard someone shift in the front row. Dad. His hands were folded tightly in his lap. His eyes were glassy, not with tears, but something older. Something he wouldn't name, even if I asked. He didn't stand. But he didn't look away, either. I stepped down from the stage and walked through the center aisle. People parted like slow water. At the back door, I paused just long enough to glance at Travis. He nodded once. Nothing theatrical. Just enough. Outside, the air was thick with Kentucky summer. Somewhere across the parking lot, a cicada whined its slow, steady song. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Marion. Micah filed a restriction against internal audit. "They're bracing. You're now the threat." I looked back at the Civic Auditorium's glass facade. My reflection stared back, half-lit, fractured across the panels. Sometimes silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it's just waiting for the room to be quiet enough to hear. Micah's name disappeared from the Technicorps dashboard before I even opened the mail. The envelope sat on Marion's desk, plain white government weight folded with just enough asymmetry to hint that it had been opened once already. It wasn't sealed properly, the gum along the flap dulled, like it had been pressed and then lifted as if someone had checked the contents and reclosed it without heat. I didn't ask. Instead, I held the envelope in my palm for a moment longer than needed. Rain tapped faintly against the window behind me. Marion didn't move, didn't speak. She was seated across from me, hands folded, eyes on the shelves beside her, rows of legal manuals, union bylaws, and labor code compilations worn to soft corners. I opened it slowly. The letterhead bore the Technicorps emblem, geometric, professional, colorless. Inside, a formal notice. The Technicorps Retirement Fund has been placed under internal freeze pending review by the State Board of Fiduciary Ethics. All distributions authorizations and external proxy privileges are suspended. It didn't say my name, or Micah's, or Shailene's, but it didn't have to. I read it again, not because I doubted it, but because something in me needed the repetition. I wasn't holding a verdict. I was holding a pause, a breath. My phone buzzed. A single message from Shailene. I didn't know it would go this far. I'm sorry, truly. I thought Micah... It ended there. No punctuation, just a blinking cursor. I didn't reply. Marian rose and crossed the room. Her steps were careful, measured. From the top drawer of her filing cabinet she withdrew a narrow tan envelope. Not legal. Personal. Yellowed slightly with time. She held it out, her eyes meeting mine for just a second before she let it go. The handwriting was unmistakable Dad's. He had always used thin blue ballpoint pens, the ones that left faint scratches if you pressed too hard. His strokes had gotten shakier these past few years, but still deliberate. Ellison, it began. You were never the problem. We were. Sometimes a legacy gets written too fast and we forget who was holding the pen. No signature, just his name printed at the bottom like a receipt from an old register. I stared at the page, watching the ink pool ever so slightly at the end of the last line, as if his hand had lingered. The smudge in the corner suggested he'd reread it, folded it slowly, maybe hesitated before sending. Something shifted in me. Not a victory, not even relief, just the weight of being seen. The anger I'd carried for months didn't leave, but it stopped pacing. Sat down, folded its legs. Outside the rain softened. I looked across Marian's study. On the far wall above a stack of boxes, something caught the corner of my eye, an old glass frame. I rose, drawn without understanding why. Inside was my original draft, the logic model for the Technicore retirement fund. My name typed in the lower right. No edits, no red lines, no proxies. She'd framed it. Marian said nothing, just kept her hands folded in her lap. I didn't thank her aloud, but something passed between us like the echo of a storm that had already spent itself. The room wasn't grand. It had no podium, no velvet ropes, no stage lighting designed to make statements. Just a hallway annexed to the main hall of records, lined with pine shelves and brushed metal placards. The smell was faintly archival clean, not sterile. Paper dust, maybe. Floor wax. Something comforting in its plainness. There was no crowd. Just 4 of us. Travis stood by the doorway, straight-backed as ever, though the gray had crept a little farther into his temples. Marian had chosen a navy cardigan worn with quiet authority. The young technician, maybe 17, still waiting for his voice to settle, stood with a clipboard that was clearly more for confidence than function. This the new wing, I asked. Transparency wing, Travis replied. First of its kind in the guild. He stepped aside so I could see the main plaque, Public Trust Initiative, established 2024 in honor of contributions unrecorded yet unforgotten. Below it was a glass case, softly lit from within. I leaned in. My badge was there. The one that cracked on the concrete floor of Storage Unit 3B. But now it was whole repaired. 2 clean halves joined by a thin seam of gold that shimmered like a scar lit just right. The military seal gleamed beneath the glass, unchanged except for that line down the center. Not hidden, not disguised. This is real, I said mostly to myself. Marion stepped beside me. We didn't want erasure to be the end of the story. There was a file to the left of the badge, my original logic model for the fund printed clean, attributed by name. Below it, an annotation line noted, Foundational Framework Verified Source Authorship. Ellison Druitt, 2003. No embellishments, just fact. The young technician stepped forward, tentative. Sir, did they really erase your name from all this? I looked at him. He was probably born the year I first drafted that model. I nodded. They did. He shifted. And you came back? I walked myself back in, I said. Takes time and shoes with thick soles. Travis let out a quiet laugh. The intern grinned, though he probably didn't fully understand. That was fine. Some lessons come later. I moved to the far end of the display and read the final placard. It named me as an honorary advisor to the fund's restructuring committee. No voting rights, no title. Just my frameworks guiding the new model. That was enough. Sometimes a record doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be held still long enough for people to see it. Marion handed me a padded envelope as we left. Mail came late, from out of state. I opened it at home. Inside, a folded note in thick pen strokes, each letter slow, intentional. Ellison, thank you for reminding us some names are too solid to be sanded off. TD. I didn't recognize the initials. Didn't need to. I placed the note in a folder marked MISC and filed it under Home Office. Back in the hallway, the badge stayed under glass fractured, gilded, visible, not because it broke, but because it held. The badge gleamed under the museum lights, not flawless, but whole. Its golden seam caught the afternoon sun like a quiet grin, reminding me that some breaks aren't meant to be hidden. Truth, when reclaimed without noise, has its own gravity. Sometimes being seen again doesn't mean being applauded. It means being placed back in the record right where you always belonged. I've learned that vindication isn't about proving others wrong. It's about standing still long enough for the truth to catch up. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments or just let it sit with you a while.